Last year, my sister, 35 female, found out her husband, 38 male, was cheating with our cousin, 40 female. He was tossed out of the house and she filed for divorce within 3 days of finding out. She went and told everyone too. We gave her as much financial and emotional support as we could. Our cousin's husband tossed her out too, and no one in our family would take her in. Her kids have not spoken to her since this all went down. To our shock and horror, 2 months after my sister filed, she decided to reconcile with her piece of crap husband. On top of that, she insisted that we supported her decision. We were especially appalled when she expected him to be invited for Christmas. I was hosting and flat out told her she might have lost her mind, but I still had mine, and her piece of crap husband would never be welcome at my house ever again. The rest of the family took the same stance. She told us she would not be coming for Christmas. I told her I would miss her. I guess that was not her hill to die on, because she showed up with her kids to celebrate and left her husband at home by himself. We have a milestone birthday coming up for our grandma, which is being held at my brother's house. The whole family will be there, except our cousin and sister's husband. Sister asked if there would ever come a time when her husband would be invited to family events again. I said our cousin would be invited back before her husband ever would. She is very upset over this and says she needs our support and says her husband is still part of the family. I told her he is not and we will not change our mind. She got so angry that we would invite our cousin before her husband, who she hates with every fiber of her being. She called me and our brother an a-hole. I told her to think about our cousin's children. They don't want to be around her piece of crap husband. We have to protect them as well. She kept crying and said we made her life so much harder and she feels all alone. I told her she made a choice, but the rest of us refused to enable her bad choices. My best friend told me I was not very sympathetic to my sister and should consider letting the piece of crap attend if cousin's kids were not around. Am I the a-hole for wanting to invite our cousin to a family event before inviting brother-in-law? Not the a-hole, but I think the husband and the cousin should just both stay away. Some things are too hard to come back from, and they've both affected so many lives. No one would want to see either of their faces. Not the a-hole. Her husband is not blood, so has less right to be at family functions than the cheating cousin does. Cousin crossed a line betraying family members, so only gets an invite if the wronged parties are agreeable. Sister might have forgiven her husband, but the rest of the family haven't. They cannot expect acceptance for him when she won't give hers for cousin. I'm 15. I have an older brother and sister who are 17 and 19. Our parents divorced when I was 13. They told us it was a mutual breakup. Both our parents have since found new partners, and my father ended up marrying his. We actually really like both the new step-parents. We also get along with my stepmother's son, who was 17. I found out last summer that my father had actually cheated on my mother with my stepmother. My mother had been devastated by it, but hid her pain from my siblings and I. Well, I've been really pissed off with my father and stepmother ever since. I've been giving them the silent treatment, which they have basically blamed on teenage hormones because they didn't know I knew. In November, we had a dinner for my father's birthday. In the middle of dinner, my stepmother made all the kids say something nice about my father. I refused when it was my turn, but my stepmother forced me to. I ended up revealing to everyone in the party that my father had cheated on my mother and married his mistress, so I don't really respect him to say anything nice. I created a crapload of drama with that. My sister immediately made the connection with my mother's depression at the time and went off on our father. My brother called our stepmother some names, which led to a fistfight with my stepbrother. So we've basically moved back home permanently with our mother, and we haven't been going over to our father's house. Our father has tried reaching out to all of us separately and is remorseful to the point of tears, but I honestly don't care. I do feel bad for how I revealed it though. My whole father's side of the family knows now, and he's kind of in crap with them too. They're literally fighting on Facebook. I feel some guilt because my parents ended up happy with their respective partners, and so were all the kids. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. If your dad and stepmother didn't want things to end up like this, they shouldn't have had an affair. These things don't just go away or get swept under the carpet after a certain amount of time has passed. That crap's on their permanent record forever, and they should always have known and been prepared for the eventuality that someone would find out and reveal it, which is exactly what's happened. You could have chosen to take the moral high ground and say nothing, but this was clearly affecting you badly, and you only let it out when someone was trying to force you to say something nice about someone you now have justifiably little reason for saying something nice about. My brother, Alan, had a one-night stand at a party with a woman, Julie. He had never met her before, and he was drunk. A couple months later, he and Julie ended up pregnant. He took a paternity test. Alan has a highly paid job. He promised to pay child support and to be there for the kid, but he refused to get involved any more than necessary with the mother. My father decided to give Alan a small two-bedroom apartment as a graduation gift. One day, Julie showed up at his door, claiming that her sister kicked her out of the house and had nowhere else to go. He let her stay with the kid, but on the condition that she didn't interfere with his life. But after about 2 months, Julie started acting like his wife. She tried calling his work to talk to him, started complaining about him coming home late. But the final straw was when she was going through his phone and got jealous of him sexting other women and then demanding that they go to couples counseling. They were never a couple, and he stated it clearly since day one. After that, he had enough. He packed his stuff up and left. He told Julie that she could live there and he would keep paying child support, but to never bother him again. She was angry. A few months after Alan left the apartment, he met Amy. Amy is amazing. Julie got jealous of Amy, called her a homewrecker. Fast forward 5 years, Alan proposes to Amy. A few months ago, Julie somehow found out where they live, and they ambushed him when Amy was traveling for work. He was waiting for them with her whole family at his house. They started yelling and berating him for being a bad father and an awful husband, for not sending enough money for his son, while living in a big and fancy house with his mistress. Her family demanded that Alan break up with Amy and to officially marry Julie, and to get couples counseling to save the relationship. Alan got mad, threatened to call the cops, and demanded them to leave his property. He later decided to evict Julie from his apartment. She tried to fight it in court, but lost. After all that, my brother decided to give the apartment to me, since he doesn't need it, and I've been saving for a house. I was so thankful that I gave him a big hug and started to skip like a teenaged girl at a Justin Bieber concert. A month after, Julie then called me crying and telling a sob story about how she can't afford rent in the same area, and that the schools are not as nice, and that her son misses his friends at the old school. That she can't have the same quality of life as before, and having to sell a bunch of her stuff. She then asked me if she can live with me and pay half of the costs, bills, taxes, etc. I blow at her, called her a lying, manipulative, gold-digging bee, and that I don't help people like her, and hung up. I told the story to a few friends, and they said I could have been more sympathetic, or at least not have been so rude, since it's hard to be a single mother. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. She should have thought of the consequences before she went after your brother. Also, if you still have contact with your brother, she may use you to try and push her way back into his life. She can go to her family if she needs help. After all, they were willing to harass your brother on her behalf. Not the a-hole. I'd be nervous about her knowing where I live. The locks have been changed, yes? Normally, I would not be good with talking to someone that way, but you can't afford to be nice with the Julies. 5 years of trying to force herself on a man who doesn't want her? Psycho. Your poor nephew. Bit of backstory. My father had a whole second family on the side. He would split his time between the two families by pretending to be on business trips. One day, my mother's best friend from high school called to tell my mother that my father was cheating, as she bumped into him shopping with his mistress in her town. My mother couldn't believe it and decided to fly out and check it for herself. She stayed 3 days at her friend's house playing detective. When my father came back home from his business trip, my mother confronted him. They divorced, and he moved to live with his mistress and sons. He very rarely saw me after the divorce, and it wasn't because my mother made it difficult or because I didn't want to see him. He didn't want to see me. He preferred his boys. He never invited me over or had me for any of the holidays. Zero financial support. No birthday gifts, nothing. He didn't even try to take me in after my mother got cancer and died. Not a call, nothing. No condolences, no checking on where I was living or who was caring for me as a motherless 16-year-old. I visited him twice after the divorce, once because it was my parental godfather's 80th birthday, and I stayed for a week, and his wife and boys tormented me the whole time there. The second time was for my grandfather's funeral, which was nearly 3 months ago. I stayed for literally one night because his wife and boys were treating me like some servant, and I wasn't having it. Now, my grandfather's lawyer contacted me after the funeral to inform me that he left it all to me. He left me his business, where my father and his sons work at. He left me his house and the house my father and his family live in. And he left me his investment and property portfolio and money. My father, of course, now knows that his father left it all to me. And not only that, he made it airtight so my dad and his family would have an extremely hard time contesting his will. My dad at first tried to smooth talk me, then threatening with a lawsuit, then back to being nice and trying a fatherly approach on how I should think of my brothers, etc., and that he is too old to start over again. A week ago, he asked me to at least give him the house and part ownership of the business, so he'd have something to take care of himself when he's much older, and for my brothers to have somewhere to work. My brothers are basically useless. 2 of them are convicted felons. One is a D addict, and the other is a scamming a-hole who just hasn't been arrested yet. I said I'd think about it. But after some thinking, I basically was like, nope, duck you and your family. And instead, I contacted my lawyer to start preparing the steps necessary to kick them out of the house. The paperwork hasn't been sent out yet, as I wanted some more time to think. So, would I be the a-hole if I kicked them out of the house and didn't give my dad or the boys a share of the business? Not the a-hole, not the a-hole, not the a-hole, not the a-hole. You don't owe your sperm donor of a father anything. He didn't respect you or your mother. He cheated, had a whole other family, and then forgot about you altogether after the divorce to go live with his new family. Your grandfather left everything to you, probably because he knew your father and his family were a-holes and didn't deserve a dime of his estate. I think you should honor that notion and keep everything to yourself. I definitely think you should go through with getting them out of the house and keeping the business to yourself. You don't have to take their jobs or anything, but keep the ownership to yourself. After the way they've all treated you, they don't deserve any of your kindness. If you ever feel guilty about it, which I hope you never do, just remember that this is the way your grandfather wanted it anyway, and honor his wishes. So, my fiance's old man is a hard dude. He's just a classic man's man. Beer, guns, and whiskey guy. I'm the exact opposite. I write poetry, I design clothes, I work in an office. I'm just not like how he thinks a man should be, and he never lets me forget. He constantly makes it a point to remind me that I better hold on to his daughter, as she's used to having real men in her life, and a real man might come and snatch her up. He also loves to insult that I am gay, which I really am not a fan of. Her brothers are similar, and make sure I know that I'm a pretty boy and not a manly man, so if I ever wrong their baby sister, they'll come after me. Last week, I went to dinner at her family's house with her parents, her brothers, and their wives. Prior to dinner, the men went out while the women cooked. I tried to stay with the women, but my fiancé told me it'd make her really happy if I found some way to bond with the guys in her family. So I went out, and it was unpleasant. At first, we were talking about football, until her brother asked me if I was ever a cheerleader, as I looked like the type to wear a skirt. This began a maybe 4-minute-long session on them mocking my sexuality and masculinity. I tried to be level-headed, but this type of behavior has been happening for the last 4 years. I snapped. I looked her father in the eye and said, and I quote, "Next time you call me gay, just remember that I regularly duck the crap out of your daughter." This, of course, was considered out of line, and I was met with yelling and an argument ensued. The women came outside and her dad said that I needed to leave and that I'm too vulgar for this family and I don't respect him, which I don't. My fiancé fought for me to stay, but I was tired of it. My fiancé left with me and she was pissed off at me, but not her dad. She said that I need to be the bigger person and I'm not making my relationship with her family any better. I didn't really have a way to defend myself, as she's right that what I said shouldn't have been said. But I think I'm not an a-hole as I have endured this for 4 years and made one clap back in that time. Am I the a-hole? Tell fiancé she has to finally stand up to her family and put an end to the mocking. Their prob's not going to like you anyway, but she's not doing a good job of standing up for you. If they are messed up in other ways, you may need to tell her you may have to reconsider the marriage if it gets to that bad of a point. Okay, technically, everyone sucks here, but your response was also funny as hell, and I would do the same thing because her relatives suck.